Eleanor, at 67 years old, lived in a cozy little house filled with the smell of old books and fresh-baked cookies. Her silver hair, usually pulled back in a neat bun, sometimes escaped in soft wisps around her kind face. She had a gentle smile, but if you looked closely, you could see a hint of a story tucked away in her eyes. It was a story she hadn't told anyone, not even her closest friends. For decades, Eleanor had kept a secret. Not a bad secret, but a very private one. It lived in a small wooden box, carefully hidden at the very back of her closet, beneath stacks of old linens and forgotten sweaters. The box itself was nothing fancy, just plain oak, but to Eleanor, it held more treasure than any chest of gold. Inside, wrapped in a faded silk scarf, were bits and pieces of her past. A pressed flower, a tiny seashell, a photograph with crinkled edges. But the most important item, the one that made her heart flutter just thinking about it, was a letter. A letter she had written many, many years ago, when her heart was young and full of both joy and pain. This letter, never sent, was a whisper from a younger Eleanor, a voice from a time when her world was changed forever. The unsent letter was not just any piece of paper. It was a ghost of a conversation, a whisper from a past that still echoed faintly in Eleanor's heart. Its edges were soft from time, and the ink had faded slightly, turning from a bold black to a softer gray. Eleanor could almost feel the weight of the pen in her young hand as she had poured out her feelings onto the stationery, each word a tear or a question. She remembered the night she wrote it so clearly. The clock had ticked loudly in her quiet room, the moon casting long shadows across her desk. Her cheeks had been wet with tears, but her resolve had been strong. She needed to tell him, to explain, to ask why. Every sentence was a piece of her broken heart, carefully placed on the page. She had sealed the envelope, addressed it with a trembling hand, and even placed a stamp in the corner. For days, it sat on her hallway table, a silent plea waiting to be sent. But she never did. Something held her back. Fear, perhaps, or pride. Or maybe, deep down, she knew that sending it wouldn't change anything. So the letter stayed, a powerful, unspoken message tucked away. It became a keeper of secrets, a silent witness to a turning point in her life. It was a letter of questions, of pain, and of a love that had once felt so big it could fill the whole world. Now it rested within the wooden box, waiting. The letter, tucked safely within its worn envelope, was addressed to a name that still brought a gentle ache to Eleanor's chest. Arthur. Oh, Arthur. He was not just a name. He was a whole season of her youth. He was the bright sunshine of summer days, the crisp air of autumn walks, and the first blush of spring flowers. When she was a young woman, Arthur had been everything. He was her laughter, her confidant, her first true love. Eleanor could still picture him clearly, his easy smile, the way his dark hair fell across his forehead, and the kind sparkle in his eyes that made her feel like the most special person in the world. They had dreamed big dreams together, sitting on park benches, holding hands under starry skies. They talked about their future, a future that felt as certain and shining as the morning sun. He had promised her forever, and she had believed him with every fiber of her being. Arthur wasn't just a boyfriend. He was the person who understood her deepest thoughts, the one who could make her laugh until her sides hurt, and the one whose presence made everything feel right. He was the reason her heart sang, the reason she believed in happy endings. That's why the letter, filled with raw emotion, was meant only for him. It was a cry from a heart that had been loved so completely, then broken so suddenly. It was a testament to the profound mark Arthur had left on her young life, a mark that time had softened but never erased. As Eleanor held the old letter, her mind drifted back, like a leaf floating down a gentle stream, to the days when Arthur was her world. She remembered the feeling of his hand in hers, warm and strong, as they walked through fields of wildflowers. Their laughter would echo through the trees, light and free, a soundtrack to their young love. Every moment with Arthur felt like a new discovery, a secret shared only between them. She recalled lazy afternoons spent by the river, skipping stones and talking about everything and nothing. He would tell her silly jokes, and she would pretend to be annoyed, but her eyes would always sparkle with amusement. He taught her how to play the guitar a little, and though she was terrible, he always praised her efforts. They danced in her living room to records, not caring if they looked silly, just lost in each other's arms. Their happiness wasn't just about grand gestures, it was in the small, everyday things. The way he brought her a cup of tea when she was studying, his encouraging words before her exams, or simply the comfort of sitting in comfortable silence together. They felt like two halves of a whole, perfectly fitted. Those memories were still so vivid, even after all these years, painted in bright, happy colors in her mind. It was a love that had bloomed beautifully, promising an endless summer. But the bright, endless summer of her love with Arthur had ended suddenly, replaced by a harsh, cold winter. Eleanor remembered the day with a clarity that still stung. It was a Tuesday, she recalled, gray and drizzly, matching the sudden gloom that fell over her world. Arthur had come to her door, his usual warm smile replaced by a distant, troubled look. He stood there, shifting his weight, unable to meet her eyes. His words were few, but they sliced through her like sharp knives. He spoke of needing to go, of a chance for a new life far away, a life that, he mumbled, didn't include her. There was no argument, no big fight, just a quiet, crushing finality. Eleanor felt her knees grow weak, her breath caught in her throat. The world seemed to spin, then tilt, leaving her unbalanced and utterly alone. He left quickly, a shadow disappearing down the path, taking with him not just his presence, but a huge piece of her heart. She stood at the window, watching until he was completely gone, the rain blurring her vision, mixing with her tears. The laughter, the dreams, the promises, all shattered in that single terrible moment. It was the kind of pain that made the air feel thin, and the colors of the world turn dull. That sad day, Arthur didn't just leave. He broke her heart into a million tiny pieces, leaving her to pick them up in the lonely quiet. In the days and weeks after Arthur left, Eleanor felt lost, a ship without a sail. The pain was a heavy cloak wrapped around her, making it hard to breathe. She tried to talk to friends, but their kind words couldn't mend the deep wound in her heart. She needed to let out the storm of feelings swirling inside her, but there was no one to truly listen. That's when she turned to paper and pen. One evening, sitting alone in her quiet room, she picked up a blank sheet. At first, only tears fell. But then, words started to come. Slowly at first, then rushing out like a river breaking its banks. She wrote about her confusion, her anger, her endless sadness. She wrote about the unanswered questions that buzzed in her mind like angry bees. Why? What went wrong? Did he ever truly love her? As she wrote, something shifted. It was as if each word pulled a little bit of the pain out of her chest and put it onto the page. The act of writing was like talking to Arthur, even though he wasn't there. It gave her a voice when she felt voiceless. She poured out every raw, messy feeling, and with each sentence, a tiny bit of the heavy weight lifted. By the time the letter was finished, she felt a strange calm. She didn't send it, but the writing itself had been a powerful medicine, a first step toward mending her broken heart. Years turned into decades, and the world kept spinning. Eleanor built a new life, a good life, filled with new friends, happy moments, and quiet contentment. The sharp edges of her heartbreak softened, becoming a dull ache she rarely noticed. But the wooden box, with its precious contents, always remained tucked away, a silent keeper of a past chapter. Now, at 67, a gentle sense of change began to stir within Eleanor. She found herself looking back more often, not with sadness, but with a quiet wonder. She realized that carrying the weight of that secret, even a small one, felt different now. It wasn't heavy, but it was there, like an old scarf she still wore even on sunny days. She had kept the letter close, a part of her private world, but she started to feel a soft pull to let it see the light. It wasn't about seeking answers from Arthur anymore. That ship had sailed long ago. It was more about releasing a part of herself, a younger Eleanor, who had bravely put her heart on paper. Sharing it felt like a final act of acceptance, a way to fully embrace her whole story, not just the happy parts. The time felt right, like a flower finally ready to open after a long sleep. She didn't know who she would share it with, or how, but the quiet certainty grew. It was time for her secret letter to finally be shared. The question of who to share her secret with gently settled into an answer that felt perfectly right. Her granddaughter, Lily. Lily was a bright, curious girl, almost 17, with eyes that saw more than most. She often spent weekends at Eleanor's house, and their bond was special, built on laughter, shared stories, and a deep, unspoken understanding. Lily wasn't just family. She was a kindred spirit, open-minded and kind. One sunny Saturday afternoon, as they sat on the porch swing sipping lemonade, Eleanor watched Lily's sketch in her notebook. "Lily," Eleanor began, her voice a little softer than usual. "I have something I want to tell you, something I've kept secret for a very long time." Lily looked up, her pencil pausing. Her expression was one of gentle interest, not pushy curiosity. Eleanor took a deep breath. "It's about a letter, a very old letter, and a man named Arthur." She watched Lily's face for any sign of confusion or judgment, but found only warmth. "He was my first love, a long, long time ago, and he broke my heart." The words, spoken aloud for the first time in so many years, felt strange, yet freeing. Lily's eyes widened slightly, not in shock, but with a growing sense of wonder. She put down her sketchbook, giving Eleanor her full attention. It was clear that Eleanor had chosen the right person to share her hidden story with. Lily's face lit up, her eyes wide with a mix of surprise and pure excitement. "Grandma, you never told me you had a big love story like that," she exclaimed, leaning forward on the porch swing. "A secret letter? That sounds like something right out of a movie. Who was Arthur? What happened? Why didn't you send it?" Her questions tumbled out, fast and eager, showing just how much she wanted to hear every detail. Eleanor smiled, a warm feeling spreading through her chest. This was exactly the kind of reaction she had hoped for. Lily wasn't judging or pitying. She was simply fascinated by this new glimpse into her grandmother's past. "Slow down, sweet pea," Eleanor chuckled softly. "It's quite a story. And yes, it feels a little like a movie sometimes." Lily settled back, her gaze fixed on Eleanor. "Tell me everything, Grandma. From the very beginning. What was he like? How did you meet? What did the letter say?" She was like a sponge, ready to soak up every word, eager to understand the hidden depths of her grandmother's heart. For Lily, this wasn't just an old story. It was a real-life romance, a piece of history that belonged to someone she loved dearly. Her genuine interest made Eleanor feel brave, ready to open up a part of herself she had kept locked away for far too long. Eleanor stood up slowly and walked inside, returning a moment later with a small wooden box. With careful hands, she opened it, revealing the faded silk scarf and, beneath it, the pale, almost ghostly envelope. Lily watched, her breath held, as Eleanor gently pulled out the letter. The paper rustled softly, a sound like a whispered memory. "Are you ready?" Eleanor asked, her voice a little shaky but with a determined glint in her eyes. Lily nodded, her own eyes wide with anticipation. Eleanor took a deep breath, unfolded the letter, and began to read. Her voice, usually soft and even, changed as she spoke the words of her younger self. It was as if time had melted away, and the feelings of that heartbroken girl were once again fresh in the room. She read about the confusion, the raw pain, the questions that had haunted her sleep. Her voice carried the weight of past tears, but also the strength of a heart that had endured. Lily listened, completely still, her gaze fixed on her grandmother's face. She could almost see the young Eleanor, sitting at her desk, pouring her soul onto the page. The words painted a vivid picture of a love lost, a future shattered, and the desperate need for understanding. Eleanor read each sentence clearly, letting the old feelings, both sad and strong, fill the air between them. It was more than just reading, it was sharing a piece of her very soul. My dearest Arthur. Eleanor's voice trembled slightly as she read. I don't know where to begin, or even if these words will ever reach you. My heart feels like a broken bird, fluttering wildly, unable to fly. She paused, her gaze distant, remembering the young woman who had written those very words. The letter continued, each sentence a raw confession. It spoke of the hurt that had settled deep within her bones, a constant ache that made even the simplest tasks feel heavy. How could you leave without a proper goodbye? Without a single word of explanation? She read, the old confusion still clear in her tone. Did our promises mean nothing to you? Did our laughter, our dreams, simply vanish like smoke in the wind? She described her sleepless nights, tossing and turning, trying to piece together what had gone wrong. I search my memories, Arthur, trying to find a reason, a sign I missed. Was it something I said? Something I did? The words were filled with a desperate longing for understanding, a plea for the truth. She wanted to know why their beautiful story had ended so suddenly, why she had been left in such painful silence. The letter was a monument to her young, shattered heart, a plea for answers that she had never received. Lily listened, her own heart aching for the young Eleanor. As Eleanor read her old words aloud, it wasn't just the memory of writing the letter that came back. It was as if she stepped into a time machine, transported directly back to that painful night. She could feel the hot sting of tears behind her eyes again, the knot of despair tightening in her stomach. The confusion that had clouded her mind then, the frantic search for reasons, for fault, it all returned with a startling freshness. She felt the ache of youth, a time when feelings were so big and overwhelming, when a broken heart felt like the end of the world. The innocence of her young love, the certainty she had once felt about her future with Arthur, now collided with the harsh reality of his departure. It was a wave of emotion, not just sadness, but a mix of nostalgia for the happy times, anger at the sudden betrayal, and a deep, aching tenderness for the girl she once was. So hopeful, so vulnerable. Reading the letter out loud was more powerful than simply thinking about it. Each word, each sentence, pulled her deeper into that past self. She wasn't just remembering, she was reliving. Her voice wavered, sometimes with sorrow, sometimes with a quiet strength that had grown since then. It was a journey through her own history, guided by the heartfelt words of a young woman who simply wanted to be understood. When Eleanor finished reading, the porch was quiet for a long moment, filled only with the soft sounds of summer. Eleanor looked at Lily, expecting perhaps pity, or even a hint of, "That was so long ago, Grandma." Instead, Lily's eyes were glistening, and she reached out to gently take Eleanor's hand. "Grandma," Lily said, her voice soft but firm. "Your feelings back then? They were so real, so important. It wasn't silly or childish, even if you were young. You loved him, and he hurt you. That's a huge thing." Lily squeezed her hand. "Anyone would have felt that way. You had every right to feel confused and sad and angry." Eleanor felt a warmth spread through her, a comfort she hadn't realized she needed. For so long, a small part of her had dismissed her youthful heartbreak as something less significant, something that time should have completely erased. But Lily, with her fresh perspective, saw the truth. She saw the depth of that young love and the profound impact of its loss. "It felt like the end of my world," Eleanor confessed, her voice barely a whisper. "And it was, for that world," Lily replied. "But you kept going. You were so brave to write all that down, even if you didn't send it. It showed how much you cared, how deeply you felt." Lily's words were a balm to an old wound, helping Eleanor truly understand that her youthful emotions were not just real, but deeply valid and important parts of her story. Listening to Lily's kind words, a new thought, soft and clear, bloomed in Eleanor's mind. She looked at the faded letter in her hands, no longer just a symbol of pain, but something more. "You know, Lily," she began, her voice thoughtful, "I never really understood why I kept it, why I couldn't just throw it away, or burn it and forget." She paused, tracing the faint lines of ink with her finger. but listening to you, and reading it again. I think keeping this letter was my way of holding onto a part of myself, the part that loved so fiercely, the part that dared to dream so big, even the part that felt such deep pain. It was a sudden, clear understanding, like a puzzle piece finally clicking into place. The letter wasn't just about Arthur. It was a snapshot of young Eleanor, full of raw emotion and honest truth. It was a testament to her capacity for love, even after it was broken. By keeping it, she had unconsciously preserved a vital piece of her own history, a reminder of who she was at a pivotal moment in her life. It was a silent promise to herself that those feelings, that experience, truly mattered. And now, sharing it with Lily, she wasn't losing that piece. She was finally allowing it to breathe, to be seen and understood, not just by herself, but by someone else who cared. As the last of Lily's comforting words settled around her, Eleanor felt a lightness she hadn't experienced in years. It was as if a small, unnoticed weight had been lifted from her shoulders, a quiet burden she hadn't known she was carrying. The air on the porch seemed fresher, the lemonade tasted sweeter. A deep, quiet sense of peace bloomed in her heart. For decades, the story of Arthur and the unsent letter had been a locked room in the house of her memories. It wasn't a sad room anymore, but it was closed off, dusty with time and unspoken feelings. Now, with Lily's gentle understanding, the door to that room had swung open, letting in the sunshine. There was no longer a need to keep it hidden, to guard it from curious eyes or dismissive judgments. Sharing this hidden part of her life, not with the intention of mending old hurts but simply of acknowledging them, brought a profound calm. It wasn't about erasing the past, but about truly accepting it, with all its joys and sorrows. Eleanor looked at Lily, her wise young granddaughter, and a genuine smile, one that reached her eyes and sparkled, spread across her face. This act of sharing felt like the final thread connecting her to that old pain had finally dissolved, leaving behind only the rich tapestry of her full, lived life. She felt complete. With the letter carefully folded back in its envelope, Eleanor and Lily continued to sit on the porch, the afternoon sun casting long, warm shadows. The air between them was filled with a new kind of closeness. "It's amazing, Grandma," Lily said, breaking the comfortable silence. "How much one person, one moment can change everything. You were so happy, and then, boom." Eleanor nodded, a thoughtful look on her face. "Yes, Lily, love has that power. It can lift you to the highest clouds, and then, when it breaks, it can feel like you're falling from them. But the falling changes you too. It teaches you about strength you didn't know you had." They talked about how heartbreak, though painful, can also make a person grow. Lily wondered if Eleanor had ever loved again. And Eleanor shared bits of her life after Arthur, how she learned to trust again, to find joy in new ways, and to build a life that was strong and beautiful in its own right. They spoke of how some changes are sudden, like a storm, and others are slow, like the seasons turning. Love, they agreed, wasn't just about happy endings. It was about the journey, the lessons, and how each experience, good or bad, shaped the person you became. It was a deep conversation, flowing easily between the old and the young, connecting their hearts through shared wisdom about life's biggest feelings. As their conversation about love and life's changes wound down, Eleanor felt a profound shift within her. It wasn't just peace, it was a deeper sense of healing. She understood now, more clearly than ever, that keeping the letter a secret had, in a subtle way, kept a tiny wound from fully closing. Like a small splinter, it was no longer painful, but it was still there, beneath the surface. Sharing the story, reading the words, and having Lily listen with such open understanding had pulled that splinter out. The act of voicing her long-held secret, of bringing it into the light, was like a final, gentle push towards true wholeness. It wasn't that she hadn't healed before, she had built a wonderful life. But this was different. This was a healing of the very last, most private corner of her heart concerning Arthur. She realized that secrets, even quiet ones, can hold a small part of us captive. By letting go of the need to keep this particular story hidden, she was setting free a younger version of herself, allowing her to fully become the strong, content woman she was today. The past wasn't erased, but its power to silently influence her had lessened. She was truly, completely, at peace with her past love, its joy, and its sorrow. Eleanor held the old letter one last time, feeling its weight, not of sorrow now, but of history. "You know, Lily," she said, a gentle smile playing on her lips. "For so many years I thought about what it would have been like to send this. To finally get those answers from Arthur. To have my say." She looked out at the garden, a thoughtful, faraway look in her eyes. "But now," she continued, turning back to Lily, "I realize that sending it would have been for a younger me. A me who still needed those answers. The me who is sitting here with you today, she doesn't need them anymore." The realization was clear and strong. The letter's purpose had changed over time. It was no longer a message to Arthur, but a message from her past self, to her present self, and now, to Lily. "Sharing this story with you," Eleanor explained, "talking about it, letting it breathe, that's what was truly important. That's what helped me. It's more important than any reply I might have gotten, or any final words I could have said to him." She understood that the true power wasn't in the sending, but in the sharing. The letter had fulfilled its purpose, not by reaching its intended recipient, but by helping Eleanor finally reach a deeper understanding of herself. As the afternoon faded into a soft golden evening, Eleanor felt a profound shift within her. It wasn't just peace, it was a bubbling joy, a lightness that made her feel like she could float. The weight she hadn't known she carried, the silent, invisible burden of her untold story, had finally lifted. She felt truly, wonderfully free. A genuine smile, bright and unburdened, lit up her face. "I feel happy, Lily," she confessed, a little surprised by the simple, powerful word. "Happier than I've been in a long time, just knowing that this part of me, this big, important story, is finally out in the open." It was a happiness that settled deep in her bones, a warmth that chased away any lingering chill from the past. There was a fresh sparkle in her eyes, a renewed zest for life. The world seemed a little brighter, the birdsong a little sweeter. Knowing that Lily understood, that her story was now a shared memory rather than a hidden secret, allowed Eleanor to fully embrace her present. She looked at her granddaughter, a future full of possibilities stretching before her, and felt a deep connection to her own rich past. Eleanor wasn't just lighter, she was more fully herself, ready to live out her remaining years with an open heart and a clear spirit. As the sun dipped lower, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Eleanor and Lily sat side by side on the porch swing. Eleanor carefully placed the old letter back into its envelope, then tucked it gently into the wooden box. But this time, the box didn't feel like a vault for secrets. It felt like a cherished memory book, openly shared. Lily leaned her head on Eleanor's shoulder, a comfortable silence settling between them. "Thank you for telling me, Grandma," she whispered, her voice full of warmth. "It's the most beautiful story." Eleanor wrapped an arm around her granddaughter. "Thank you for listening, my dear, for understanding." In that moment, the generations seemed to melt away. An old woman, her heart finally unburdened, and a young woman, her own heart now touched by a past she hadn't lived, were perfectly connected. The letter, written decades ago in a moment of pain, had not been sent to Arthur, but it had found its true purpose across time, building a stronger bond between grandmother and granddaughter. It was a special, quiet ending to a story that had begun with heartbreak. The letter from the past had become a bridge, linking Eleanor's youth to Lily's present, showing that love, loss, and the strength to carry on are timeless parts of every human heart. They sat there, watching the stars begin to dot the darkening sky, two souls now bound by a shared, precious memory.